Most people who get canceled stay canceled. They apologize. They disappear for a few months. They come back with a rebrand and hope people forgot. Aiden Ross looked at that playbook and did the exact opposite. He got banned from Twitch 8 times. He promoted gambling to millions of viewers. He platformed some of the most controversial figures on the internet. He said things that incinerated his mainstream reputation repeatedly and deliberately. And through all of it, he got bigger. Every ban, every controversy, every headline that was supposed to end him, made him larger. So the question isn't whether Aiden Ross is controversial. The question is how someone builds an empire specifically by being the villain, and whether that empire is actually as solid as it looks from the outside. To understand how Aiden Ross became who he is, you have to understand where he came from. He grew up in Boca Raton, Florida, until his parents divorced and his childhood essentially got scattered across the country. One year he was the new kid in New York, the next in California, then back to Florida, and then somewhere else. And what that experience teaches you, whether you want it to or not, is how to read a room. Fast. You learn which version of yourself makes people laugh, which version makes people uncomfortable, which version gets you accepted, and which version gets you ignored. Aiden learned all of it, over and over again, in school after school after school. And without realizing it, he was training himself for the exact job he would eventually have. When Aiden started streaming NBA 2K from his bedroom, that same survival instinct he'd developed moving between schools kicked in immediately. He'd read the chat, adjust his energy, give the viewers exactly what they seemed to want in real time. And it worked. But he was also smart enough to recognize when a ceiling was approaching. He saw that gaming content had limits. So he pivoted. He launched a series called E-Dating that exploded online. And then he started doing streams with rappers, treating platinum-selling artists like they were his actual friends, pushing boundaries, making things awkward on purpose, shattering the wall between Hollywood and social media. In April alone, he gained over 2 million followers. He was adding six-figure viewer counts. For a brief moment, Aiden Ross had everything. And this is where the story gets complicated. Because when you're the face of a platform like Twitch, the biggest star, they have a very specific kind of offer starts coming your way. Think of it like a button. You press it, and a few $1 million appear. The problem is the people writing those checks usually come from places that don't survive scrutiny. Gambling sites, crypto casinos, unregulated platforms that need your audience more than you need their money. Most creators see the button and walk away. They calculate the cost to their reputation and decide it isn't worth it. But Aiden Ross didn't grow up with the luxury of walking away from money. He's talked openly about going nights without dinner, about watching his family struggle financially in his senior year. When you've experienced that, a button that makes all of it disappear forever is very hard to ignore. Aiden pressed the button. He took a massive sponsorship deal with Rubit, one of the earliest online crypto casinos, and started gambling live on stream for insane amounts of money. Tens of thousands of dollars going into digital slot machines while hundreds of thousands of people watched. Leaked messages suggested he was making up to $2 million a month. And the lifestyle reflected it overnight. Lamborghinis, LA mansions, watches that cost annual salaries. And the money wasn't just for him. He helped his parents, supported his family, gave gifts to people around him that didn't even sound real. But while the money was very real, so was the backlash. Because streaming gambling to an audience that included a significant number of young people, that's not a controversy you can charm your way out of. And then came the collision with Twitch. The platform was caught in an impossible position. On one side, Aiden Ross, their biggest star, generating enormous traffic and revenue. On the other side, corporate advertisers like Coke and Disney, who did not want their brands associated with gambling content. So Twitch banned unregulated gambling sites. They framed it publicly as a moral decision protecting young viewers from addiction. But according to Aiden, and this is the part that's genuinely interesting, it wasn't about morality at all. It was about money. Twitch banned the gambling sites that weren't cutting them in on the revenue, and then immediately signed a DraftKings deal worth billions. Which means gambling didn't disappear from Twitch. The gambling that didn't benefit Twitch disappeared from Twitch. That distinction matters. With his gambling revenue cut off, Aiden needed a new hook. And he found one in the most controversial person on the internet at that time. Andrew Tate had gone from total obscurity to being the most viral figure on the planet in a single summer. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, every major platform had blacklisted him. But Tate didn't have a Twitch account, which meant there was no existing rule stopping Aiden from putting him on stream. So while the rest of the internet was busy deplatforming Tate, Aiden rolled out the red carpet. The first stream averaged over 100,000 viewers and peaked at 266,000. The biggest stream Aiden had ever done. Bigger than the rapper streams. Bigger than everything before it. There was absolutely no chance he wasn't doing it again. And then Twitch finally had enough. In January 2023, Aiden received his 7th ban, a 30-day suspension. And something about sitting in silence for a month, locked out of his entire empire, changed him. Not in the way Twitch intended. Instead of coming back humbled and careful, the ban radicalized him. He came back convinced that Twitch wasn't enforcing rules. They were rewriting them, targeting him specifically. And that belief pushed him to do the one thing that would permanently change the streaming landscape. He started migrating his audience to Kick, a brand new platform built by the founders of Stake, specifically designed as the antidote to everything Twitch was doing. He would go live on Twitch, talk to his 7 million followers, and tell them to move to Kick for the real content. And then in February 2023, Twitch issued his 8th ban, this time permanent. What happened next is genuinely remarkable. Aiden Ross had been permanently banned from the biggest streaming platform on Earth, and he responded by helping build a competitor from scratch. Kick's user base grew over 400% in the months following his arrival, largely on the back of his controversy. He tested every limit the new platform would allow. He pulled up adult content on stream. He posted things he knew would destroy his mainstream reputation. He did it all deliberately, not because he'd lost control, but because he was proving a point. On Kick, you can't be canceled. The controversy was the marketing, and it worked. By mid-2023, Aiden Ross had achieved something that the influencer economy considers statistically impossible. He had been banned, deplatformed, and labeled a public enemy. And he was bigger than ever. And then came the moment that cemented his position at the very top. An interview with Donald Trump that peaked at over 580,000 concurrent viewers. To put that in context, that is one of the most watched streams in the history of the medium. He also revamped the rapper streams at the highest level, bringing on names like 21 Savage and Playboi Carti. He launched a boxing promotion company called Brand Risk, looking to build a business that could outlast his streaming career entirely. By any conventional measure, Aiden Ross had won. He had beaten the system that tried to remove him. He had built something that couldn't be taken away. And he had done it all before the age of 23. But here's where the story takes its most interesting turn. Because when you beat the game at 22 years old, a new problem appears. Not cancellation. Not controversy. Boredom. Aiden has talked openly about this. About how the grinding and the building felt electric, but once the goals were achieved, the feeling disappeared. He announced retirements and came back a week later. He said he was done with gambling, then signed new deals months later. He said he was moving back to Miami to find himself, then flew back to LA. From the outside, it looked like someone struggling with who they were. But Aiden's own explanation is more unsettling than that. He's become desensitized. He's pressed the button so many times that the lights don't look as bright anymore. And when that happens, you have to raise the stakes just to feel anything at all. So what is the most true and authentic version of Aiden Ross? When he was asked that question directly, his answer was telling. He said he'd do a stream with anyone. Anyone who'd been stripped from platforms deserves a chance to speak. And that sounds like a principle. But when you listen to the full context, it also sounds like a person who has been the villain for so long that they've genuinely lost track of where the performance ends and the person begins. He built an empire on controversy. He proved you can be banned, deplatformed, and publicly despised and still win financially. But the cost of pressing that button over and over is visible in his own words. He describes himself as a puppet, a slave to the entertainment. Someone who struggles to feel things. That's not a victory speech. That's a warning. Whether he ever figures out how to step back from the machine he built, that's the only part of this story that hasn't been written yet.